The letter sat unopened on Mary Wilson's kitchen table, but she already knew the contents would shatter her world. Arizona Territory, 1885. A time and place where a woman alone faced an uncertain future, especially one who just turned 30 and whose husband had departed on the evening stage 3 days earlier with their neighbor's 19-year-old daughter. Mary's trembling fingers finally broke the wax seal, unfolding the paper to reveal Robert's familiar scrawl. He didn't even have the decency to look her in the eye when he abandoned their 7 years of marriage. "Mary," the letter began without affection, "I've gone east with Lillian. I won't be returning. The ranch is yours, though I've taken my share from our accounts. Robert." The brevity stung worse than a rattlesnake bite. 7 years dismissed in 5 sentences. Mary crumpled the paper, pressed it against her heart, and released a cry that echoed through the empty ranch house outside Eagar, Arizona. The home they'd built together from nothing now felt cavernous. Outside, the merciless Arizona sun beat down on the drought-stricken land. Mary had never felt so alone. With Robert gone, she'd need to handle the ranch herself or lose everything they'd worked for. Her parents were dead, her sister lived in California, and most of the town would soon be gossiping about poor Mary Wilson, abandoned for a prettier, younger woman. Mary dragged herself to her feet, splashed water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the small mirror above the washbasin. Her chestnut hair still shone, though a few strands of silver had appeared. The sun had kissed her skin with freckles and fine lines around her eyes. She wasn't old, but she wasn't 19 anymore either. She'd need help with the ranch. Robert had taken their regular hand, Miguel, with him to manage his travels. That left 30 head of cattle, 4 horses, and endless fences needing attention. The next morning, Mary rode into Eagar, head held high despite knowing whispers would follow her. The general store was her first stop. They needed a new ranch hand, and Mr. Cooper often knew who was looking for work. The bell above the door announced her arrival. "Mrs." Cooper looked up from her ledger, sympathy immediately washing over her round face. "Mary, I was just wondering when we'd see you," she said, her voice overly bright. "Can I get you anything? Just some coffee and sugar, please," Mary replied, keeping her voice steady. "And information, if Mr. Cooper has any. I need to hire a hand for the ranch." Mrs. Cooper's expression shifted. "So it's true then. About Robert and the Turner girl." Mary's throat tightened. News traveled faster than wildfire in Eagar. "I need a ranch hand, Sarah." "That's all I'm here to discuss." From the back of the store emerged Gerald Cooper, wiping flour from his hands onto his apron. "Mary, I might know someone. Fellow came through yesterday looking for work. Seemed capable, has experience with cattle from up Montana way. Does this someone have a name?" Mary asked. "Nathan Calloway," came a deep voice from behind her. Mary turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with shoulders broad enough to block the morning sun streaming through the window. His face was tanned and weathered beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, with sharp blue eyes that caught her off guard. Unlike many drifters, his clothes were clean if worn, and he stood with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth. "Mr. Calloway," she acknowledged, straightening her spine. "I hear you're looking for work." "Yes, madam," he replied, removing his hat. His hair was dark with a hint of copper where the sun had lightened it. "And I hear you might be hiring." Mary assessed him carefully. He looked strong, capable, and most importantly not from Eagar. He wouldn't bring gossip to her doorstep. "The work is hard, Mr. Calloway. 30 head of cattle, repairs, general ranch maintenance. I can offer room, board, and $15 a month." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. 20 would be fair for a foreman's responsibilities, madam." "I never said foreman," Mary countered. "You didn't have to. A woman running a ranch alone needs more than just a hand. She needs someone to deal with the matters some folks won't take seriously coming from a lady. His eyes held hers, direct and unafraid. Mary felt heat rise to her cheeks at his bluntness. 18, and that's as high as I'll go. Deal, he said without hesitation, extending his hand. Mary took it, surprised by the gentle strength in his grip despite the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. You can start today. I'll be heading back after I finish my errands. I'll be ready, Nathan replied, settling his hat back on his head with a nod, as Mary turned to pay Mrs. Cooper. She heard the storekeeper whisper to Nathan, "You should know that her husband, her business is her own." Nathan cut in quietly but firmly. "I'm just here to work cattle." Mary pretended not to hear, but something in her chest loosened just a fraction. At least one person in Eager wasn't interested in her humiliation. The ride back to the ranch was silent, Nathan following on his own horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding. Mary couldn't help but notice how naturally he sat in the saddle, moving with the animal rather than against it. "The bunkhouse is there," Mary said when they arrived, pointing to a small but sturdy structure near the barn. "There's a pump for water, and I'll bring out some bedding." "Much appreciated," Nathan replied, dismounting with fluid grace. He glanced around the property with a critical eye. "Good land you've got here. Needs some attention, but good bones." "My husband had other priorities, it seems," Mary said before she could stop herself. Nathan's gaze settled on her, neither pitying nor judgmental. "His mistake." Mary didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and headed toward the main house. She returned with linens and found Nathan had already unsaddled both horses and was examining a broken corral fence. "This needs replacing," he said, gesturing to the rotted wood. "Should do it before we move the cattle back to this pasture." "We can start on that tomorrow," Mary replied, handing him the bedding. "Supper's at 6 if you'd care to join me in the house. Otherwise, you're welcome to cook for yourself." Nathan considered for a moment. "House would be fine, madam, if it's no trouble. Easier to discuss what needs doing." "Mary," she said suddenly, "if we're to work together, you might as well use my name." A smile crossed his face, transforming his serious expression. "Nathan, then." That evening, Mary found herself unusually conscious of her appearance as she prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and salt pork. She'd changed from her riding clothes into a clean dress, though still practical for ranch life. She told herself it was simply proper to be presentable, even for an employee. Nathan knocked precisely at 6, hat in hand, hair still damp from washing. He'd shaved, she noticed, and wore a clean shirt despite the day's work. "Smells good," he said, standing awkwardly at the door until she gestured him to the table. "Nothing fancy," Mary replied, setting out the food, "but filling." They ate in companionable silence for a while until Nathan spoke. "I've been thinking about how to manage the herd with just the two of us. It'll be challenging but doable if we're smart about it." "I know cattle," Mary said. "I grew up on a ranch north of here. This isn't my first roundup." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Good. That'll make things easier. Still, we should hire temporary help for the main drive come autumn." "Assuming we have the money," Mary said, her voice tighter than she intended. "Robert took his share of our savings." Nathan's jaw tensed momentarily. "Then we'll need to be creative." "I've worked with less." After dinner, they sat on the porch, planning the next day's work as the Arizona sunset painted the distant mountains in shades of crimson and gold. Mary found herself studying Nathan's profile as he spoke about cattle breeds and grazing rotations. There was something solid about him, reliable in a way that made her realize how unreliable Robert had been long before he left. "Why'd you come to Eager?" Mary asked during a lull in the conversation. Not much happens here. Nathan considered his answer, rolling a cigarette between his fingers without lighting it. Been moving around since the war. Got tired of the northern winters. Figured I'd try the desert for a change. He glanced at her. What about you? How'd you end up here? Robert had dreams of cattle ranching. His family had money, but he wanted to prove himself by starting fresh. We came out from Missouri 7 years ago. Mary looked out at the land she'd poured her heart into. Turns out his dreams changed more easily than mine. Nathan nodded, finally lighting his cigarette and taking a thoughtful draw before speaking. Some men don't recognize the value of what they have until it's gone. He looked directly at her. He was a fool to leave all this and you behind. The words hung in the air between them, more significant than they should have been coming from a man she'd just met. Mary felt her cheeks warm and stood suddenly. It's getting late. We have an early start tomorrow. Nathan stood as well, crushing out his cigarette under his boot. Yes, madam. Mary, he corrected himself with a slight smile. I'll see you at first light. Mary watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, his silhouette strong against the darkening sky. For the first time since finding Robert's letter, she felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet, but perhaps a distant cousin to it. The next morning arrived with the harsh brilliance of an Arizona summer day. Mary woke before dawn, dressed quickly, and was surprised to find coffee already brewing when she entered the kitchen. Nathan stood by the stove, frying eggs and bacon in her cast iron skillet. He glanced up with a nod. Hope you don't mind. Thought we could use a hot breakfast before starting on that fence. I don't mind, Mary said, pouring herself coffee. The domesticity of the scene struck her. How long had it been since someone else had prepared breakfast in her kitchen? Robert had considered cooking women's work. They ate quickly, discussing the day's tasks. Mary found Nathan easy to talk to, respectful of her opinions without being condescending. When he disagreed, he explained his reasoning rather than simply overruling her. The morning passed in productive labor. Nathan proved to be skilled with tools, efficiently replacing the rotted fence posts while Mary helped measure and hold boards. By midday, sweat soaked through both their shirts and the Arizona sun beat down mercilessly. Let's break until it cools some, Mary suggested, wiping her forehead with a handkerchief. No sense risking heat stroke. Nathan nodded agreement, gulping water from his canteen. Could use the time to ride the perimeter, check for other weak spots. I'll come with you, Mary said. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. They rode side by side across the ranch, occasionally stopping to note repairs needed or to discuss where the cattle should graze next. Mary found herself enjoying his company. Nathan was knowledgeable without being boastful, and he listened when she spoke. How long were you married? Nathan asked as they rested their horses beneath a cottonwood tree. The question caught Mary off guard. 7 years. No children, she added, answering the unspoken question that usually followed. Not for lack of trying. Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. My wife died in childbirth. Both of them did, her and our son. That was 12 years ago now. I'm sorry, Mary said softly, understanding better the shadows she sometimes glimpsed behind his eyes. Life happens as it will, Nathan replied simply. Can't change the past, just have to keep moving forward. Mary studied him, this man who carried his grief so quietly. Is that why you drift? To keep moving forward, partly, he admitted. Though I'm starting to think maybe it's time to stop drifting. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that Mary wasn't ready to acknowledge. She turned her attention back to the land, pointing out where a spring usually flowed in wetter years. As weeks passed, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch slowly transformed under their combined efforts, fences mended, cattle healthy, outbuildings repaired. Nathan proved invaluable, his knowledge of ranching matching and sometimes exceeding Robert's. Unlike Robert, however, Nathan never took credit for Mary's ideas or dismissed her concerns. Mary found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in the final year of her marriage. Nathan had a dry wit that emerged when he was comfortable, telling stories of his travels that made the evenings on the porch pass pleasantly. Word spread through eager that the Wilson Ranch was thriving despite Robert's departure. Mary heard the whispers when she went to town, some admiring, others suspicious of a woman living alone with a male employee. She held her head high, ignoring the gossip. One afternoon in late July, Mary rode into town for supplies and encountered Judith Turner, mother of the girl who'd run off with Robert. "Mary," Judith said stiffly outside the general store, "I want you to know I had no idea what Lillian was planning. Had I known, I would have stopped it." Mary regarded the woman she'd once considered a friend. "Your daughter is 19, Judith. Old enough to make her choices, poor as they might be." Judith's face flushed. "They're to be married in St. Louis next month. He's written to tell us." The news shouldn't have hurt. Mary had already lost Robert in every way that mattered, but the confirmation stung nonetheless. "I wish them joy of each other," Mary said tightly. "Excuse me." She completed her purchases quickly, eager to return to the ranch, but as she loaded her wagon, Sheriff Dawson approached. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, tipping his hat. "I've been meaning to stop by your place. Heard you've hired a drifter to help out." "Mr. Calloway is an experienced cattleman," Mary replied coolly. "I'm sure he is," the sheriff said. "Still, a woman alone with a stranger, people talk, and I make it my business to know who's in my jurisdiction. This Calloway have any papers, references?" "I don't recall the town voting you authority over my hiring practices, Sheriff," Mary said. "But if you're so concerned, feel free to ride out and introduce yourself." Sheriff Dawson frowned. "Just looking out for your welfare, Mrs. Wilson. These drifters can be unpredictable. Dangerous, even." "The only danger I've faced recently came from a man I'd known for 7 years," Mary replied sharply. "Good day, Sheriff." She drove home with tension knotting her shoulders, annoyed at the intrusion and the implication that she couldn't manage her own affairs. When she arrived at the ranch, she found Nathan leading her prize bull into a separate pen, his movements calm and deliberate despite the animal's size. "Problem?" Nathan asked, immediately noticing her expression as she climbed down from the wagon. "Just town gossip," Mary said, unloading supplies. "The sheriff might ride out to question you about your background. Apparently, I'm not capable of choosing trustworthy employees." Nathan's face remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Would it be better if I moved on?" "I don't want to cause you trouble." "No," Mary said, more forcefully than she intended. "That is, unless you want to leave." "I don't," he said simply, taking a heavy sack of flour from her arms. "This is the first place in a long time that's felt." He paused, searching for the word. "Right." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm build over the distant mountains, Mary found herself studying Nathan's profile in the fading light. In the 2 months since he'd arrived, she'd come to rely on his presence, his steady competence, the quiet conversations that stretched into the evening. "Robert's getting married again," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. "To Lillian Turner, in St. Louis." Nathan's expression darkened. "That didn't take long." "No," Mary agreed. "Though I suspect it was planned before he left. He never was one for uncertainty." "Does it hurt?" Nathan asked, his directness catching her off guard. Mary considered the question honestly. "Less than I expected. My pride, perhaps, more than my heart." She looked out at the gathering storm. "I think our marriage ended long before he physically left. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating Nathan's face as he turned toward her. "You deserve better, Mary." The intensity in his voice made her heart beat faster. "The sheriff thinks I'm foolish to trust a drifter," she said, changing the subject to safer ground. Nathan's laugh held little humor. "The sheriff's probably right about that. Most drifters aren't to be trusted. Are you most drifters?" Mary asked. He met her gaze steadily. "No, but you'd be wise to remember I've spent 12 years avoiding putting down roots." "And yet here you are," Mary said softly. "Here I am," he agreed, his voice equally quiet. The first fat raindrops began to fall, breaking the moment. They moved quickly to secure anything that might blow away in the coming storm, working together with the efficiency of a long-established partnership. By August, the ranch was running more smoothly than it ever had under Robert's management. Nathan had introduced new breeding techniques that promised to improve their stock, and Mary had expanded their vegetable garden, preserving food for the coming winter. Sheriff Dawson had indeed paid a visit, questioning Nathan with barely concealed suspicion. Nathan had answered calmly, revealing he'd fought for the Union, worked ranches from Montana to Texas, and had no outstanding warrants. The sheriff had left grudgingly satisfied but warned Mary to keep her doors locked. The morning of August 18th dawned with unusual coolness, hinting at the eventual end of summer. Mary woke early and found a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table, alongside a note in Nathan's distinctive handwriting, "Gone to check the north pasture. Back by noon." And Mary smiled at the flowers, touching the delicate blue petals. It was her birthday, something she'd mentioned only in passing weeks ago. The fact that Nathan had remembered and found the rare blooms touched her deeply. She spent the morning baking a simple cake, something she hadn't done since Robert left. By the time she heard Nathan's horse approaching, the kitchen was filled with the scent of vanilla and sugar. "What's all this?" Nathan asked as he entered, hat in hand, his face lighting up at the sight. "You remembered my birthday," Mary said. "I thought we might celebrate a little." "Wish I could offer more than wildflowers," Nathan said, a touch of embarrassment coloring his voice. "They're perfect," Mary assured him. "No one's given me flowers in years." They shared the cake after dinner, sitting closer than usual on the porch steps as the stars emerged in the clear desert sky. Mary was acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her, the clean scent of soap and leather, the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling evening air. "I have something to tell you," Nathan said finally, setting aside his empty plate. "I received a letter yesterday from an old Army friend. He's offering me a partnership in a ranch up in Colorado. Good land, fair terms." Mary's heart sank, though she fought to keep her expression neutral. "That sounds like a fine opportunity." "It is," Nathan agreed, studying his hands. "A chance to have something of my own again after all these years." "When would you leave?" Mary asked, dreading the answer. "That's the thing," Nathan said slowly. "I've been thinking about it all day, riding the north pasture, and I realized something." He turned to face her directly. "I don't want to go." Mary's breath caught. "Why not?" "Because in these 3 months, this place has become more home to me than anywhere I've been since the war." His eyes held hers. "Because you're here." The honesty in his voice made her tremble. "Nathan." "I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "Your husband's barely gone and you've had no time to think of anything else. But I wanted you to know that if you wanted me to stay, not just as your foreman but, eventually, as something more, I would." Mary looked at this man who had steadily rebuilt not just her ranch but her faith in herself, who saw her strength instead of exploiting her vulnerability. "It is too soon," she agreed softly, "but not as soon as you might think. Robert was gone in all the ways that matter long before he physically left, and you She hesitated, finding courage. You make me remember what it feels like to be valued. Nathan's hand found hers in the darkness, his touch tentative but warm. I can wait, Mary, however long you need. They sat in silence, hands joined, watching the stars wheel overhead. It wasn't a declaration of love. Not yet, but it was a beginning, a promise of possibility that Mary hadn't dared hope for when she'd opened Robert's letter those months ago. The first frost came in early October, silver white on the grass as Mary stepped onto the porch, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. The cattle drive to the railroad at Hallbrook had been successful, bringing enough profit to see the ranch through winter and into spring. Nathan had proven invaluable, his reputation among the other ranchers ensuring they got a fair price. Coffee? Nathan asked, joining her on the porch with 2 steaming cups. Thank you, Mary said, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Feels like winter's coming early this year. Nathan nodded, looking out over the landscape they'd worked together. We're ready for it, though. Hay stored, repairs done, cattle in good condition. We make a good team, Mary said, glancing at him over the rim of her cup. We do, Nathan agreed, a smile touching his eyes. In the month since her birthday, they'd grown closer, though both had been careful to maintain proper boundaries. Nathan still slept in the bunkhouse, still treated her with professional respect when others were present. But the evenings were theirs, filled with conversation and gradually increasing honesty. I had a letter from my sister yesterday, Mary said. She's invited me to visit for Christmas in San Francisco. You should go, Nathan said, though she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. You haven't seen your family in, 3 years? 4, Mary corrected, and I've been thinking about it. It would be good to see Emma and her children, but... She paused, gathering courage. I'd miss you. Nathan's eyes softened. I'd miss you too, but I'd be here when you got back. I know you would, Mary said with certainty. That's what made me realize I'm ready, Nathan. Ready, he echoed, setting down his coffee cup. Mary turned to face him fully. For whatever comes next, for us, if that's still what you want. Nathan's expression transformed, hope and longing breaking through his usual reserve. It is. It has been since that first day in the general store, though I tried to tell myself otherwise. I think perhaps I fell in love with you that day on my birthday, Mary admitted. When you offered to leave for my sake, even though you wanted to stay. I've loved you longer than that, Nathan confessed, his voice rough with emotion. But I needed you to be sure, to have time to know your own mind. He reached for her hand, his touch warm against her chilled fingers. Mary Wilson, I've wandered most of my adult life, but I've found where I belong if you'll have me. Mary closed the distance between them, her free hand touching his face. I will. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, awakening feelings Mary had thought long dormant. When they parted, she saw her own wonder reflected in Nathan's eyes. I should speak to the preacher, Nathan said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Not yet, Mary replied. Let's wait until after Christmas. I'd like Emma to meet you, and I want to be certain this isn't just loneliness, Nathan suggested, or convenience, Mary nodded. Not that I believe it is, but I want us to start with absolute certainty. I'm already certain, Nathan said, but I'll wait as long as you need. That night, Mary lay awake in her bed, touching her lips where Nathan had kissed her. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the Arizona landscape with improbable white. Change was coming. Just as the seasons turned, but for the first time since Robert's betrayal, Mary welcomed the future with hope instead of dread. Mary's journey to San Francisco proved more revelatory than she'd anticipated. Her sister Emma welcomed her warmly into her elegant home, her successful merchant husband and 3 children creating a picture of domestic happiness that once would have made Mary envious. Instead, she found herself sharing stories of the ranch, of the improvements she and Nathan had made, of her growing feelings for the quiet cowboy who'd arrived when she needed him most. "You sound like a woman in love," Emma observed one evening as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed. "It looks good on you, Mary. Better than when you were with Robert, if I'm being honest." "Was I so unhappy before?" Mary asked, surprised. Emma considered her answer carefully. "Not unhappy exactly, but not fully yourself either. You always seem to be trying to be what Robert wanted rather than who you are." She smiled at her sister. "This Nathan seems to appreciate the real Mary." "He does," Mary agreed, warmth spreading through her at the thought. "He sees me, all of me, and values what he sees." "Then don't waste time, sister," Emma advised. "Life is too short for hesitation when you've found someone who truly sees you." Mary returned to Eager in early January, the train journey giving her time to reflect on Emma's words and her own feelings. By the time she stepped onto the platform at Hallbrook, where Nathan waited with the wagon, she knew her mind completely. His face lit up when he saw her, though he maintained a respectable distance until they were alone on the road back to the ranch. "I missed you," he said simply, his eyes never leaving the road ahead but his voice revealing everything his expression concealed. "I missed you too," Mary replied. "Enough to know I don't want to be separated again." Nathan glanced at her then, hope evident in his gaze. "What are you saying, Mary?" "I'm saying yes," she answered. "To everything, to us, to marriage if that's still what you want." Nathan pulled the wagon to a halt, turning to face her fully. "It's all I want," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "To build a life with you, to wake up beside you each morning, to face whatever comes together." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small wooden box. "I've been carrying this for weeks, hoping." Inside lay a simple gold band set with a small, perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's," Nathan explained. "I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right person." "It's beautiful," Mary whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit as though made for her. Nathan kissed her then, the restraint of months dissolving into tenderness and promise. When they finally continued toward home, Mary found herself planning their future with joyful certainty. They were married 2 weeks later in Eager's small church, a simple ceremony attended by the few friends Mary had maintained after Robert's departure. Sheriff Dawson came, his initial suspicions of Nathan having evolved into grudging respect. The Coopers from the general store stood as witnesses, Mrs. Cooper dabbing at her eyes throughout the brief service. "I think she was crying more from relief that you wouldn't be an old maid than happiness for us," Nathan joked later as they rode back to the ranch, their ranch now, in both name and fact. Mary laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "She's been trying to match me with every unmarried man who passed through since the day Robert left. I'm glad you came along before she resorted to the widower Jenkins with his 9 children." That night, as Nathan carried her across the threshold of the house they would now share, Mary felt no shadow of her past marriage. This was different, a partnership of equals, founded on mutual respect and genuine affection. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," Nathan said softly, setting her on her feet in the parlor, where a fire crackled welcomingly in the hearth. "It feels right," Mary replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Like the name was waiting for me." Their coming together that night was tender and unhurried, both discovering and being discovered. For Mary, who had known only Robert's increasingly perfunctory attentions, Nathan's careful devotion to her pleasure was a revelation. For Nathan, the chance to love again after so many years of solitude was a gift he hadn't dared hope for. "I love you," he whispered in the darkness, his arms secure around her. Have since that day you stood in Cooper's store, refusing to let gossip break you. I love you too, Mary replied, the words coming easily now. Thank you for seeing value in me when I couldn't see it myself. Spring arrived with new beginnings. The ranch flourished under their combined care, Nathan's experience with cattle breeding yielding a stronger, healthier herd. Mary expanded her garden, adding flowers alongside the practical vegetables, finding joy in creating beauty as well as sustenance. In late April, as wild iris bloomed in the meadows, Mary woke one morning with a certainty she hadn't felt before. Nathan, she said as they shared breakfast, I think I'm going to have a baby. Nathan's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. Are you sure? Mary nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. 2 months now, I think I've been feeling different. Fear flashed across Nathan's face, quickly replaced by wonder. Mary understood immediately his first wife had died in childbirth. This joy would always carry that shadow for him. We'll take every precaution, she promised, reaching for his hand. Dr. Reynolds is a good physician and I'm healthy. Nathan nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. A baby, he said, awe in his voice. Our baby. The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Nathan built a cradle from pine harvested from the mountains to the north, his skilled hands crafting something that could be passed down through generations. Mary sewed tiny garments, her stitches neat and tight against the Arizona winter that would arrive around the time of the birth. Robert's name was rarely mentioned, though Mary received word through town gossip that his marriage to young Lillian had quickly soured. She felt no satisfaction at the news, only a distant pity and gratitude for her own escape. In November, as the first snow dusted the higher elevations, Mary went into labor. Nathan rode for Dr. Reynolds at the first contraction, his face tight with barely controlled fear. Everything will be fine, Mary assured him, squeezing his hand before he mounted. We're stronger than fate, remember. The labor lasted through the night, Mary's strength and determination matching the intensity of her pain. Nathan remained by her side despite Dr. Reynolds' suggestion that he wait elsewhere, as was customary. My place is here, he said simply, supporting Mary's back as she pushed, whispering encouragement when her strength flagged. With the dawn came their son's first cry, strong and insistent in the quiet ranch house. A boy, Doctor. Reynolds announced, placing the red-faced, dark-haired infant on Mary's chest. A fine, healthy boy. Nathan's face transformed as he looked at his son, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered cheeks. He's perfect, he whispered, touching the tiny hand that curled reflexively around his finger. Just like his mother. They named him William after Nathan's father, with Thomas as his middle name to honor Mary's. As Mary recovered and William grew, the ranch seemed to flourish with new purpose. Nathan hired 2 permanent hands to help with the expanding herd, allowing him more time with his family while maintaining the business they were building together. News reached them in early spring that Robert had left Lillian, moving further east without her. The girl had returned to her parents' home in disgrace, her youthful beauty already fading under the strain of abandonment. You ever regret it? Nathan asked one evening as they sat on the porch, William sleeping peacefully in Mary's arms. How things turned out. Mary looked at her husband's face, lined by sun and laughter, honest and steadfast in a way Robert's never had been. She thought of their son, the ranch that was thriving under their care, the love that had grown between them day by day. Not for a moment, she said truthfully. Robert leaving was the best thing that could have happened to me, though I couldn't see it then. Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders. He was a fool, he said, echoing his words from that first day, but I'm grateful for his foolishness every day. As am I, Mary agreed, leaning into his embrace as the Arizona sunset painted the land in gold and crimson. It led me home. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quiet determination. The ranch expanded, their careful management and Nathan's innovative breeding practices, yielding increasingly valuable stock. Mary gave birth to twins, a girl and boy they named Emma and James, when William was 3, completing their family with joyful chaos. Robert Wilson became a distant memory, his name mentioned only when necessary to explain the past to William, who understood in the simple way of children that Nathan was his father in all the ways that mattered. On the 7th anniversary of Nathan's arrival at the ranch, Mary woke before dawn to find his side of the bed empty. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she found him on the porch, watching the stars fade as the eastern sky lightened. Couldn't sleep. She asked, joining him on the swing he'd built the previous summer. Just thinking, Nathan replied, drawing her close against the morning chill. About how different life might have been if I hadn't walked into Cooper's store that day, if I'd kept drifting as I'd done for so long. We might never have met, Mary acknowledged, resting her head on his shoulder. Or perhaps we would have somewhere else, sometime else. I like to think some people are meant to find each other no matter the circumstances. Nathan smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. A romantic notion, Mrs. Calloway. I've earned the right to be romantic, Mary replied. 7 years ago today, my life changed forever, and every day since has proven it was for the better. From inside came the sound of small feet padding across the floor, followed by Emma's voice calling for her mother. Speaking of better, Nathan said with a chuckle, standing and helping Mary to her feet. Duty calls. As they went inside to begin another day together, Mary reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Robert's betrayal, which had seemed like an ending, had merely been the closing of one chapter before the beginning of something far more beautiful. Nathan had been right that first day. Robert had indeed been a fool. But his foolishness had opened the door to a happiness Mary hadn't known was possible. And for that, in the most unexpected way, she would always be grateful. In the years that followed, the Calloway Ranch became one of the most prosperous in Arizona territory. Nathan's expertise with cattle and Mary's sharp business sense created a legacy that would sustain their children and grandchildren through the changing times ahead. William grew to follow in his father's footsteps, learning the ranching business from the ground up. Emma, with her mother's independence and determination, eventually became one of the first women to attend the territorial university. James, the quietest of the 3, discovered a talent for veterinary medicine that proved invaluable to the family business. Eager grew alongside the Calloway family, the town expanding as the territory moved toward statehood. Nathan served on the town council, his straightforward manner and fair judgment earning him the respect of neighbors who had once viewed him with suspicion as a drifter. Mary established a small library, donating books and ensuring that local children had access to education beyond the basic schoolhouse lessons. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration that brought together the entire community. Under a canopy of stars, with lanterns illuminating the ranch yard, Mary and Nathan renewed the vows they had taken in that small church so many years before. I never expected this, Nathan confessed later that night, as they stood alone on the porch where so many of their important conversations had taken place. After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never imagined finding you, building all this together. Mary touched the silver threading through his still thick hair. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, When Robert left, I thought my future had been stolen. Instead, it was just beginning." Nathan drew her close, their bodies still fitting together perfectly despite the passing years. "I've never been a religious man, Mary, but I can't help feeling there was something more than chance at work the day I walked into that store." "Providence, perhaps," Mary suggested. "Or simply the world righting itself after going wrong." As they stood together under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the life they'd built from heartbreak and hope, Mary was certain of one thing above all others. Robert's abandonment had not been her ending but her beginning. In losing what she thought she wanted, she had found what she truly needed: a love built on respect and partnership, a family created through choice rather than obligation, a life rich with purpose and belonging. And as Nathan's arms tightened around her, strong and sure as they had been that first day, Mary knew that some endings were simply doorways to far better beginnings, if one had the courage to step through them.